FIFA says this is the most popular World Cup in history. More than 6 million tickets sold. Record demand. Yet millions of viewers around the world are all asking the same question. If the stadiums are supposedly sold out, why are there thousands of empty seats? The pictures came early. During the second game of the competition, South Korea against Czechia in Guadalajara, the cameras kept finding the same thing. Around a stadium that was supposed to be close to full, there were whole rows sitting empty. The attendance read out inside the ground was 44,985, in a venue with a capacity of 45,664. On paper, that is an almost sold-out arena, just a few hundred short of the maximum. On screen, large sections of the stand looked deserted. That gap between the number announced and what viewers could plainly see is what set the whole story in motion. Supporters watching at home, and plenty inside the stadium, started asking the obvious question. How can the official figure be that high when there are so many empty seats during the game itself? It is the kind of mismatch that does not go unnoticed at an event this size, and it spread quickly. A day later, football's governing body responded. In a statement, the organizers explained how their attendance figures are actually put together. They said the official numbers reflect the number of tickets scanned and the number of spectators present inside the stadium footprint, rather than a visual assessment of how full the seats happen to look at any given moment in the match. In plain terms, the figure is built from who came through the gates, not from a head count of the seating bowl while the ball is in play. The statement added that the organizers work closely with stadium authorities and ticketing teams so that every published figure rests on what they called verified operational data. Then came the part that drew the most attention. The governing body said that during the match in Guadalajara, several ticketed fans could be seen standing in the concourses rather than staying in their assigned seats throughout the game. The argument, in other words, is that the people were in the building. They had simply left their seats and were watching, eating or drinking somewhere. The television cameras were not pointing. By this reading, the empty seats on the broadcast were not unsold tickets at all. They were occupied tickets whose holders happened to be standing elsewhere at that moment. That explanation matters because of everything the organizers had been saying in the build-up. This World Cup was sold on the idea of overwhelming demand. The message going in was that fans across the planet were desperate to be there, that interest had reached levels the tournament had never seen before. Empty seats during the very first matches put that message under pressure, and they landed in the middle of an argument that had been simmering for months. That argument is about the cost of getting through the turnstiles in the first place. Ticket prices have been one of the loudest talking points around this World Cup long before a single ball was kicked. This is the biggest edition in the competition's history, a 48-nation tournament spread across 104 games, and the organizers set the starting price for a ticket at $140. That was the floor. At the other end of the scale, regular seats for the final in New Jersey began at $8,680. Not hospitality, not corporate packages, regular seats, starting at that figure. And those were only the published starting points. The tournament uses dynamic pricing, where the cost of a ticket moves with demand rather than staying fixed, so the more people want a particular game, the higher the price climbs. On top of that, an active resale market pushed many prices higher still. Faced with criticism over all of this, the organizers eventually released a small number of $60 tickets, handing them to national federations so that each country's regular supporters had a route in at a lower cost. Put all of that together, and you have the backdrop to the empty seat debate. When supporters see gaps in the stands at a tournament that has been described as in record demand, and when those same supporters have spent months watching prices rise, the questions come fast. The visible emptiness and the cost of a ticket became two halves of the same conversation. Guadalajara was not the only example either. The day the statement landed, more empty seats appeared during co-host Canada's opening match, a 1-1 draw with Bosnia and Herzegovina. So this was not a single odd-looking game in one city. Two of the early fixtures, staged in two different host nations, produced the same images of unoccupied seats, and that repetition is part of why the story gained traction so quickly. Before the tournament had even begun, The president of football's governing body, Gianni Infantino, had already laid out his defense of the pricing. Speaking on the eve of the World Cup, he argued that the prices were lower than what fans would end up paying on resale markets, and broadly in line with what people pay for other major sporting events in North America. His case had several parts, and it is worth going through each of them. He started with the sales figures. The governing body's president said that more than 6 million tickets had been sold by that point, and he described the demand as unprecedented. Not unprecedented by a little, he stressed, but by a factor of 10 or more. He framed the World Cup as a unique event, one that comes around only once every 4 years, and made the point that staging it in a particular part of the world means working with local habits and local customs rather than against them. Then he turned to the comparison with American sport, which sat at the heart of his argument. The entry price of $60, he said, was the lowest of any American sport in its playoff phase. The average ticket price of $500, he argued, came in below the average for American playoff games. His view was that the fair comparison is not with a regular season fixture, but with those big playoff occasions, and that measured against them, the World Cup actually looked reasonable. He went further, pointing out that when tickets were placed on the secondary market, they sold for much more than face value. To him, that was proof the original prices had been set accurately. If people were willing to pay far more to resellers, the argument went, then the starting prices could not have been too high. He also made a broader financial case about where the money goes. Every dollar the tournament generates, the president said, is put back into football. He claimed that if the governing body sold its television rights to pay TV channels, the way many others do, it would make around 4 times as much revenue as it does now. And he argued that even if the organizers simply gave tickets away for free, they would still end up being sold on the black market, so a low official price would not actually protect ordinary fans. He closed that defense by describing his organization's job as a balancing act and said it invests in places no one else does, naming South Sudan and Bhutan as examples of countries that benefit. So what you are left with is 2 pictures sitting side by side, and it is worth laying them out plainly. On one side, the organizers point to 6 million tickets sold, to demand they describe as record-breaking, and to an explanation that the empty seats on television were ticket holders who had stepped away into the concourses. On the other side, supporters and observers look at the visible gaps during the opening matches, set them against months of complaints about how much a ticket costs, and ask whether the official attendance figures really match what was on the screen. Both of those positions are now part of the same story, and the tournament has only just started. That last point is the important one for what comes next. The bulk of the 104 games is still to be played, right across the host nations, over the coming weeks. Every one of those matches will bring its own announced attendance and its own set of television pictures. So the question of how full these stadiums truly are is not going to be settled by 2 games in 2 cities. It is going to be tested again and again, fixture after fixture, all the way through the tournament. Which brings us back to where we started. How can a World Cup with more than 6 million tickets sold keep showing rows of empty seats? The organizers' answer is that the seats were never as empty as they looked. Their figures, they say, count scanned tickets and the fans inside the stadium footprint, including those standing in the concourses, rather than a snapshot of the seating bowl at any single moment. Whether that answer satisfies the supporters who watched the gaps appear during South Korea against Czechia, and again during Canada's draw with Bosnia and Herzegovina, is a separate matter, and it is tangled up with the pricing row that has shadowed this World Cup from the very beginning. FIFA insists the demand is real. Millions of tickets have been sold. But as more matches are played and more cameras scan the stands, the question is not going away. Are these stadiums genuinely full, or is the World Cup facing a problem nobody expected? Over the next few weeks, football fans around the world are about to find out.